Hey guys, welcome back to Vertical Momentum. Yes, you're seeing me for the fifth time today. Thank you guys for hanging out. It's going to be an amazing episode. We're going to be talking about something that's near and dear to my heart: veterans and mental health. We might even throw some podcasting in down the road. But if you listen till the end, we're going to give you three things that you can use today to help improve your mental health. My friend Rachel, I've been on her show. She's been on my show before, and she's a veteran. She's a mental health advocate. She's a podcast host and one of my dearest friends. And I'm so grateful to be able to have her come on the show. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here again for the second time. It's been incredible watching your journey, your growth, and having you on my show. And I'm really excited to do this again.
I love it. And as you can see, we changed a little bit. We went from vertical, we went from horizontal to vertical. So a lot of great things are happening. Vertical momentum, it's going. So before we even start, what is your definition of resiliency?
My definition of resiliency, I can't even remember how I answered that the last time that you asked me. So I'm curious to go back and listen to my answer from over a year ago. But I would say at this point in my life, my definition of resiliency is just continuing to move forward, no matter what. Because I think that we often underestimate the power of just forward movement, even if it doesn't feel like it's accomplishing something huge. But when we look back, we realize that that little bit of forward movement is what got us to that big picture goal or plan or whatever it is that we're looking forward to in life. And to be resilient is to continue no matter what life throws at us, because life will always throw something at us.
And I love your podcast. I love your theory that your story doesn't end here. I love that.
Thank you.
So let's hop back a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your military service and tell us how that went in your military service.
Yeah, so I joined the military in 2015. Branch was the Navy, for those of you who don't know me and are tuning into this episode. And I really joined for something different. I didn't join like, some people have military families and they're military brats and they join because of that. Some people join specifically for college. Everyone has their reasons, I realized. At boot camp, they try to tell you that we're all joining because we want to serve our country. And yes, there's a little bit of that in there, but everyone always joins for some kind of personal reason. And for me, it was that I just needed something different. I had just come out of a season of my life where I was in a toxic relationship for 3 years. I was kind of a few months out of that relationship when the recruiter contacted me and said, "Hey, I had tried to join the military in the past. I dropped out of the delayed entry program, was initially told that I couldn't join again. But when he called me again in 2014 and said, "Hey, we're allowing people to join again on a waiver that had tried to join in the past. Are you interested?" I did say yes after a little bit of thought, because again, I just needed something different with my life. And I was living in Iowa. For those of you who are from the Midwest, you understand why I would want to get out of the Midwest after living there for so long. It just is for me, it felt like a very stagnant place where I just wasn't doing what I wanted to do, doing the most with my life. And so I really just made that decision kind of spur of the moment, but for something different. And so I had initially wanted to join as an air rescue swimmer in the spec ops community of the Navy. And it was either going to be an air rescue swimmer or a Navy diver. And the reason behind that was because I have a swimming background. And I had swam for probably about 10 years prior to that. And the idea of doing something that was action-packed in the military and encompassed what I really loved to do was exciting to me. So to be in the spec warfare community, in really any branch of service, you have to obviously do testing to even see if you're physically qualified to do it. And so for the Navy, it's a PST. Don't exactly remember what PST stands for, probably like physical standard test or something. But what it involved was you would do a swim for, I want to say it was a 500-yard swim, which for me was fairly simple. And then it was push-ups, it was pull-ups, dead hang pull-ups, by the way. So from like straight arms all the way up, all the way down. It was 4 to 6 of those, depending on if I wanted diver or rescue swimmer. And then it was so push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, and then it was a run. And what I really struggled with was the running component of it, because I had to get that run under 12 minutes for a mile and a half. And so long story short, for that, pre-Navy era of my life, I didn't actually end up picking up a contract as a air rescue swimmer or a diver. I ended up bringing my run from like 15 minutes and 30 seconds down to 11 minutes and 30 seconds over the course of a year, which was incredibly impressive for me. It went from 0 pull-ups to 6 dead hang pull-ups. So I learned a lot, and I built myself up a lot during that time period. But I ended up going into the Navy as a avionics technician because I did not get that contract. And that was kind of the backup job for me. And so I didn't know anything about avionics. Didn't go into that job field because I loved avionics or really knew anything about it. It just happened to be the furthest out ship date that we picked because I wanted to allow myself time to try to pick up a contract in spec warfare. And so I went into this job field knowing absolutely nothing about it, but gave it a chance. And I would say my boot camp experience, it was interesting. I didn't feel like boot camp was as tough and mentally challenging as I expected it to be. I went into the Navy, not straight out of high school. I went into the Navy when I was 22 years old. So for me, it was like, I already experienced a little bit of life prior to the Navy. It wasn't like this was like, welcome to your adult life, welcome to the world, like it is for a lot of people that join the military. And so for me, having been through prior experiences that to me felt tougher, I was a little disappointed by boot camp. I really loved the people that I met in boot camp. I'm still connected with my RDCs from boot camp to this day, every single one of them. Well, most of them, I should say. But it just didn't quite meet my expectations. And I found out towards the end that a lot of that had to do with the fact that the military was in this kind of weird transition period with females being integrated in. Now, obviously, females had been integrated into the military for quite some time in 2015. But if you look at the history of specifically the SAPR program and sexual assault, a lot of people in the military, mostly men in the military, felt like they had to walk on eggshells around women when they were in an instructor position and then there was a student. And some of it, yes, was because there were students that would, use sexual assault scenarios to their advantage in a wrongful way, which do not condone that at all. But it also created this weird rift where a lot of the women in my division, myself included, felt like we didn't get treated equally as, as tough as the men in our division because people were afraid to get in trouble and they felt like they had to walk on eggshells. And that's kind of the general consensus that came out of the end of that 8-week period of boot camp. But still a good experience. And I would say for me that I felt like the military was going to be this family that took care of each other, where men and women were very respectful to each other, because that is the type of environment that boot camp made it out to be. When we walk down the street, we greet each other. We say, "Good afternoon, petty officer. Good afternoon, chief. Good morning, chief." That's just kind of what you're trained to do in boot camp because you're learning the foundational basics of being a sailor. And so when I got to my A school in Pensacola, Florida, and I realized that this is not the environment, and it took me a couple of weeks to really realize that. I would say I didn't quite realize that till the end of my time there. It seems like when we go from this 8 weeks of strict, you're going to do this at this time and do what I tell you to do when you do it. No cell phones, no connection to the outside world other than the few phone calls that you get. And then you get this like incredible burst of freedom all of a sudden that they try to phase in. But I mean, people are people. You can only do so much to control people. These things happen, and that's not an excuse to say that sexual assaults happen and that people are terrible people for the things that they do, or people just do terrible things, I should say, in these training environments. But that this is a reality of it, is that when I got to A school, I realized that there were people that were specifically out to prey on the new females that were coming in. I'm sure males as well. I didn't really have a lot of those conversations, but kind of weird relationships between instructors and students. I mean, it just didn't seem like as honest of a place as I thought it was from boot camp. And so that was kind of my first like, oh, well, this is kind of a weird culture, but okay. Well, when I went to, well, I'll backtrack a little bit. I got in trouble when I was in A school too. I went to captain's mast for providing alcohol to minors. And so when I went to my first duty station, I was ready for like a complete change. Like I wanted to present myself as a completely different person. I didn't want people to think I was a bad person, but I also understood a little bit of how the culture could be from my time in A school. And I just wanted to focus on me when I got to my first duty station. And so I did. I was spending a lot of time in the gym, did a lot of gym classes, just really kept to myself. I was in my room. I went to work, I went to the gym, I went to chow for dinner, I went back to my room, I went to bed. That was kind of my daily routine every single day. I didn't really do much outside of that. I was afraid to hang around too many people I didn't know where alcohol was involved because of my already existing alcohol related incident. If you get two in the military, you get kicked out. And then the other side to it was that I kind of had trust issues with people because of the experiences that I had seen. I mean, I had a friend that she got beaten, not like severely beaten to where she was like in the hospital, but she got physically abused, and we had to go rescue her from a situation when I was in A school. I had a friend that was sexually assaulted when I was in A school. I'd seen numerous situations of just poor leadership and people kind of pitting against each other. And I really just didn't want to be a part of that, but it didn't jade my perception of the military at that time. I was still very excited to go into my command and learn new things and be a part of this community. But I just kept to myself. I kind of reclused a little bit because I didn't want to create a weird perception. Well, when I got to my first command, people were really friendly with me, and I realized later on, and I was actually told later on, that the reason that they were friendly is because they had actually pulled up my Facebook before I got to that command, and they had called dibs on me. And the person that won the dibs on me was the person that was, surprise, surprise, the most friendly with me when I got there. And so this guy in particular, him and I hung out a lot because I thought that we were just really good friends. And it turned out later on that he had feelings for me. And when I had told him, like, hey, we're friends, it kind of turned into something where a lot of the people in my shop were pitted against me. And so there's kind of this pattern in my military career where there's this mob mentality. And I think looking back on it now, I think it's just that people are in survival mode. I don't hold animosity towards people for that time period in my life. I saw a lot of it happen at my next command too, where if someone came in to the shop that did not fit that idea of what is normal, quote unquote normal to the people in the shop, they kind of extradited them. They would move them to a different area. We're going to send you to line shack. We're going to send you to go work in safety. We're going to send you to go work in admin because you don't fit our mold of what we think a person should be, and you're not falling in line. And it wasn't even that people were being defiant. It's just that people thought differently. People learned differently. And that's the beauty and diversity of our military that was not being embraced. And so, it was after a while, probably at my second command, later on in my second command, that I started to realize that leadership wasn't necessarily what I would like to be around, that the environment was not healthy for my mental health. And it did get to a point when I was on a detachment in Japan where I did almost take my own life. And we can get into more of that later if you want to dive into the deep details of that scenario. But just to kind of give a general overview of my military career and how that was, I would say that there was just this continuing pattern of people banding together, whether it morally felt right to them or not, because they were in survival mode. And that is definitely something new that I have realized over the last 2 years, is that it's not, yes, there is a level of personal responsibility there, but I also believe that we don't know what we don't know. And sometimes it takes being out of that situation to realize why we acted the way we acted. Because I'm not going to sit here and say that I was 100% perfect the entire time I was in. I know that there was things that I did when I served that were also toxic and probably affected other people's lives in a negative way too. But, understanding and forgiveness and the healing aspect has really allowed me to understand a lot of why what happened to me in the military happened to me. So to describe it, I guess it was pretty negative when I was in it. Now I'm very much grateful for the learning experience when I served, because my experience in the military quite literally created who I am today.
Now, were you assaulted at all?
I was, yeah.
So talk to us about that.
Yeah, so the first time when I was in Pensacola, there was a individual who was a trainer, or not a trainer, he was actually a staff member. And he had worked at the Naval Health Clinic there on base. And so there was this bar on base, it's called Portside. I'm surprised it hasn't been shut down by now, because I heard that majority of the ARIs on that base come out of Portside. But it's also kind of one of those things where, like, if we can keep it on base, it's better to keep it on base, because people are going to drink. Do we prefer it to be out in town and ruin the relationship out in town, or do we prefer it to be on base? And they're always going to move towards on base, because then it keeps it at the lowest level possible. So I had seen this guy several times when I was out at Portside. I went there quite a bit when I was in Pensacola. And there's one night that I ended up going back to his place with him. And I don't remember full details of everything, but I just remember it being a super uncomfortable situation. And to be completely honest with you, I don't remember if I completely said no to him, but I remember he was asking me to do all these things that I did not want to do. And I didn't feel safe leaving that situation and going back to my barracks. Now, my barracks was next door to the place where he was at, because he was a staff member. They had this like nice barracks right next to the all-female barracks, but going back to the female barracks late at night, I can't remember. I think there was a certain time period where we actually could not come back in because there was a curfew. So like if you were out, you had to stay out and then come back in the morning, I think. I think you got in trouble if you came back in. But that one was such a weird scenario for me to break down in my mind. And for a long time, I felt like it wouldn't fall under the scenario of a sexual assault, because a lot of times when it comes to scenarios where someone is drinking, people are weird about that. They're like, well, how do you know if it was assault? Because how do you know if you're both drunk? How do you know if you consented or not? But I really felt, looking back on it, like I was being preyed on, because most of that night he was like standing off to the side, just kind of like wouldn't leave me alone, like standing off to the side, like creepily staring at me. And then when I went back to his place and I was clearly uncomfortable, and there were things that I didn't want to do, he would just push forward with it anyway. And I want to talk about this specifically because I think there's a lot of people that have been in these scenarios where they're questioning themselves in their minds, and they're like, I don't know, was it sexual assault or was it my fault? And I think a lot of us that are in these scenarios do blame ourselves for it and think that, yes, it was my fault because I put myself in that situation. But, you know, I talked earlier about how I thought the military was going to be a safe place when I first joined and when I was in boot camp. And I think it's really sad that I felt like I could not be around males or certain males by myself and drink without feeling like I was going to be taken advantage of in some way. And so that's the first story of sexual assault. Now, the second one, that one happened when I was in Naval Air Station Whidbey Island, which was my second duty station. And now this situation did not actually fully manifest into like actual sexual intercourse or anything like that, like the first one did. But this guy I had met on Tinder because I was trying to make friends. And like I said, when I went up to my first really only duty station, to be completely honest, I really kept to myself mostly. But there was a point where I decided, you know, I want to go out and I want to make friends outside of the people that I work with. And so someone had told me I use Tinder as a platform to make friends and it works really well for me. So I said, okay, well, I'll try that too. And I was very clear with this individual when I had met him that I was just trying to make friends. I wasn't trying to look for anything romantic or anything sexual. Like I just was trying to make friends because I was new to the area. And so one night he was like, hey, come over to my barracks room and let's have some pizza and watch a movie. I said, okay, cool. Well, like I said before, I was very much in my routines at that time. The gym was a very huge part of just me and who I was. And so, I had my like 3 workout classes that I would go to. I'd do like Zumba and mixed fit, and I'd have my workout. I had a trainer because the base provided them for free. And so I went to work, and then I went back to my barracks. And I think I had gone to the gym, and then I went to chow at the chow hall to eat with some of my friends. And then after that, I had gone back to my barracks, and I hadn't even like showered or anything after the gym. This guy's just like bugging me constantly, like, hey, I ordered pizza already. Pizza's getting cold. I'm like, okay, well, I didn't give you a specific time that I was going to be there. I just said we would hang out, and, I'll get there when I get there. So anyway, I was like, I haven't showered or anything yet. Just give me a little bit. And he's like, oh, no, it's fine. You'll just come on over. I'm like, okay, whatever. So he comes and picks me up, even though it's like right down the block. But he drives over to my barracks, picks me up, brings me to his barracks, and we watch a movie. So everything was fine when we were watching the movie. It was a barracks room, so there's nowhere to sit. It's one of those roommate style barracks rooms where you have the bed on each wall, right? And then you have the little desk in between. And so one was his roommate stuff, and I don't know that he had a roommate. I didn't ask, but then the other side was his stuff. So he sat on the chair. I sat on his bed, ate some pizza, even though it was cold, and, we watched the movie. It was when the credits were rolling in the movie that he came over to the bed, and he started advancing on me, and he started trying to kiss me, and he started putting his hand down my pants, and I told him no. Which for me, and I'm not going to get too much into my background unless you want to, but for me, saying no in situations where I'm uncomfortable has proven to be very difficult throughout a lot of my life. And a lot of that I've connected to the way I was raised, because I wasn't really allowed to say no a lot when I was younger in situations where I was uncomfortable. And I wasn't sexually assaulted or anything when I was younger, but that I think the way that we are raised in certain things that are ingrained in us, in certain activities and scenarios, it really sets the precedent for a lot of how we act the rest of our life until we can break that pattern and realize that that pattern exists. And so I was able to say no to this guy. But what was crazy to me is I had thought when I had said no that it would mean no and then someone would stop. He laughed and he kept going. He kept trying to put his hands down my pants. And so, I'm pinned down on his bed at this point, and he's still trying to like do whatever. And I was able to get up from the bed as he is still trying to like kiss me, and he's still trying to put his hands down my pants. And I think I said no to this guy probably 10 different times. And at this point, I'm over by his door, because they're barracks rooms. They're fairly small. It did not take me long to get over by the door, but he pins me up against the wall, and he takes my hand down and puts my hand down on his, he's erect at this time, and he puts my hand on him, and I'm like freaking out, because I'm like, well, what the hell is going to happen? And so I'm finally like, listen, like either you're going to take me back to my barracks or I will walk, but I am leaving. And so I think that's when he finally got the point, and he's just like, oh, okay. And then he like, gave me a ride back to my barracks. And then afterwards he sends me this message, and he's like, oh, you're so hot. And I'm like thinking to myself, what was sexy about that? Like, there was nothing hot about that situation at all. Like, that was extremely creepy. It was very predatory, and what's most interesting to me about that scenario is when I went back to my workplace the next day and I was talking about it. I wasn't talking about it in like a hey guys, I feel like I got sexually assaulted, because again, I didn't realize at the time what it was. I was still kind of processing it, but I was talking about it at my workplace, and the first thing everyone told me, and even years later, everyone told me, well, you shouldn't have sat on his bed. Well, why'd you go over there in sweatpants? Well, why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? And everything was my fault. And so then obviously, as someone who survives these scenarios and everyone's telling you it's your fault, you start to internalize, or I started to internalize and think, well, maybe it is my fault. And so I never actually fully reported that. I didn't report any sexual assaults to the military. unfortunately, I didn't hear good things about outcomes of people that had reported their sexual assaults to the military. And so I didn't even really feel comfortable with it because I felt like everyone that I talked to about my situation at my duty station, who realistically, I was an E2 at the time, they should have looked at me and said, hey, you already told us details. This would be unrestricted, but do you want to report this? Or realistically, if they were following protocol, they should have reported it. Because that's how it's supposed to be. And there's all these rules and regulations in place that are supposed to protect men and women in the military. But I found that even when I went to a senior chief at one of my last commands in the Navy, and I said, hey, when I was on detachment, I watched this guy get his ass smacked by other guys, and he seemed really uncomfortable with it. And, I don't know. I just know that this individual was not the kind of guy that was going to stand up for himself, and the other guys were very much quote unquote alpha males. And I've noticed again a pattern where leadership is being told about something and they're not doing anything about it. And so when we look at sexual assault numbers in the military, yes, there's training, yes, there's systems in place, but I think the sexual assault numbers are way lower than they actually are, because I would say that 99.9% of females that I talk to that have served in the military have been sexually assaulted or sexually harassed at some point in their career.
So then how many years did you actually put in, and what was the reason for you to get out?
I was in for 6.5 years. Originally was supposed to be 4. Ended up extending because the Navy changed their guidelines to where you had to align either your rotation date with your EAOS, end of active obligated service date, or vice versa. I ended up extending my EAOS to my PRD, so added an extra 2.5 years onto my contract. And I did a little bit at shore duty in the beginning, which isn't normal. Most people start sea duty and then go shore. So my dates were kind of a little bit off. I ended up getting out ultimately because of a lot of it because of my mental health, but a lot of it because of the leadership, which I think is kind of a general consensus for a lot of people that I talk to that get out too. I remember it was right after I had signed my extension. I was on a detachment in Bahrain, and there was this one individual that was on my detachment. There's only a few of us females on that detachment anyway, but there was this one individual who would just make the most crass comments about females on that base. There was a lot of reservists, National Guard reservists, who would stand the gate watch in Bahrain. And every time we would pull up to this gate, he would be making these comments about this one female. And I would constantly say, like, hey, can you not talk like that, please? Can you keep your comments to yourself, please? And he would laugh it off, and he would continue to do what he was doing. And so I brought it up to the first class. I said, hey, I don't like when this individual talks like this. It makes me uncomfortable. Can you have a conversation with him? Oh, that's just how he is. Okay. So I went and talked to the chief, talked to other first classes. No one did anything. And that was the first instance where I was like, maybe I really don't want to be a part of this organization. Because yes, leaders are doing a good job of getting the mission done, but leaders are not doing a good job taking care of their people. And if you don't have your people, you can't complete your mission. And I think that's the issue the military is running into right now with recruiting and retention of people in the military, is that we focused on the mission for so long that some people, yes, they're very mission oriented, but we're in this era where people are very human oriented, and they haven't quite flipped the switch to understand how to tap into that people first mentality, because the military, I don't think, has ever really been designed to be people first. And that was probably the main reason I got out. My mental health was very much deteriorating. I started to see this culture of leadership that really didn't care much about me as a person. And that was a pattern on probably every single detachment I went on. I served with some incredible people. I don't want to make it sound like every single person that I served with was a bad person. But I served with a lot of people who did not understand basic concepts of leadership. And there's a lot of people who will tell you, if you're serving in the military, who told me, be the change. If you don't like it, stay in, be that better leader. But it really ultimately got to the point where I was like, if I continue to stay in the military, how is this going to benefit me in my life and in my goals? And I realized that it wasn't going to be in line with my values, with my goals, and that it was breaking me more mentally than it was helping me. And so I could have actually stayed in and done a maternity tour because I got pregnant a few months before I got out. I decided ultimately that my mental health mattered more and I got out.
All right. So before we get any further, because I want to dig a little bit deeper, I want to thank our sponsors. As you can see, it's up below, it's up above me. Now it's not below me anymore. But when I was when we were deployed in 2003, we played Halo like every single day. That was our thing. And my friend JF actually writes military and science fiction books. So if you're a guy that loves stuff like Halo and military inspired books and science fiction, check out JF Holmes' books. Truly amazing. I love them all. So if you guys are readers like me and you want to support a veteran, check out JF Holmes up above, and I'll get you that information. Or you can write books below, and I'll get you that information. So now let me ask you a question, because one of my friends, Sergeant Nick Valentine, says when you step off base, the military doesn't give a shit about you. Your phone stops ringing. You don't have the camaraderie. You don't have a mission anymore. You don't have money coming in. So a lot of us end up looking at the bottom of a bottle, or some of us end up like me, end up looking at the barrel of a weapon because we just can't take it anymore. What was your military transitioning like out now that you didn't have a mission, you didn't have a job, you didn't have the camaraderie, and now you're an expected mother?
Yeah, so I thought that it was going to be super easy. And the reason why is because I was limited duty, in my last year in the military. And so for me, I was like, oh, I got a whole year to just get used to being a civilian, and it'll be easy. I'll just continue what I'm doing from there. I want to caveat with saying I was not planning on getting pregnant. My plan was that I was going to get out. I was going to go to nursing school. I had already started nursing school while I was LIMDU. My leadership was gracious enough to let me go to school full time at Seattle Pacific University, driving 1 to 2 days a week down to Seattle to do either clinicals or a class. The rest was all on Zoom. I did not have to show up to the workplace unless it was absolutely necessary. This was also during COVID time, so a little more leniency as far as physically being in the workplace. But I thought that year was going to prepare me, and I was so incredibly wrong for a few reasons. The first one, that I wasn't planning on being pregnant. And so when I got out and I was in my second trimester, I was like, well, I can't go really get a job because I'm only going to work at that job for a few months and then I'm going to have a baby. And then do I want to be working or do I want to be home with my baby? And I really wanted to be home with my baby. So I'm kind of torn there. The other reason I couldn't really continue going to nursing school because COVID, the vaccine was a huge thing. It's still, I think it's still mandated at a lot of universities for healthcare in Washington. And I decided that I didn't want to get that. And so I ended up dropping nursing school, mainly because of that, but also because of my pregnancy. And so I ended up quite literally the day that I got out of the military, sitting there thinking, what the hell am I going to do now with my life? And so I wanted so badly to be an entrepreneur and to take control of my own life and live this life of freedom. I've actually wanted that for 3 years now. My mindset was not in that place when I got into the military. I was so used to just having a paycheck coming in and all these things, but there was so much change that hit me all at once that I was not prepared for, that I really was in this deep pit of depression. And it's such a weird, I feel like it's a unique transition story. Maybe not so unique because I meet other women now that were also pregnant and going through similar things when they got out. But it wasn't for me that I felt like, oh, well, I really love my job in the military and now I have nothing. For me, it was that I just was in this like weird stagnant place in my life where I was super depressed and I didn't really know what to do because what I wanted to do and the person that I wanted to be wasn't aligning with what I was doing and the person that I was. But then there's also this weird area where I'm now a mom. And so there's other things that I have to do in my life. And so it's like all this forced change all at one time. And so I found myself a lot of days just doing absolutely nothing and just not even doing like the basic things. Like I'm talking not showering sometimes for days, not brushing my teeth, which for some people, yeah, it sounds disgusting, but when you're really in the throes of depression, that's the last thing on your mind. And I'd heard of people like this before, but I'd never been like that in that deep of a place before myself. And so it was really, really hard. And I would say that it wasn't until probably a few months ago that I really started to climb out of this hole that I was in. So I'm still on that journey. It's not like now all of a sudden everything's incredible and life is as good as it can be, but I'm in a better place now than I was, I'd say a year ago today.
But now,
And
how
go
are
ahead.
you supporting your newborn baby and yourself?
So my husband has a business. He has a construction business. I will say it was tough losing $6,000 a month in income from me getting out of the military. And that's another area that I kind of really grappled with when I was deciding if I should get out or if I should stay in, is that I knew I had a baby coming and I knew that there was a lot of income being lost. I did end up getting unemployment for a little bit when I got out of the military, and then I am now a 90% disabled veteran, so I get a little bit of money from that each month. But yeah, for a while there, it was incredibly, incredibly difficult financially, and even that is something that as we were growing as entrepreneurs, as an entrepreneurial family, and as we're doing all these big things financially too, because my family ended up purchasing a storage facility earlier this year, so that was like incredibly great financially, but at the same time, to get something like that, you have to put money into something like that, and so financially, it was very, very difficult for us to go through that season of life as we're kind of building, but also playing catch up in other areas too. Anyone that's an entrepreneur knows that it is not easy at all because now we're 100% in control of our finances and our income. It's not like I just show up to a job and then I get paid for it. But then also, like I said earlier, being a part of my daughter's life in a very big way is very important to me. And so understanding that, like, yeah, I could go get a job. Yes, I could put my time and energy into this, but then I can't be the mom I want to be. And so it's like this constant battle in my head. But the income mainly comes from my husband's business and then also the VA disability that I get in every single month.
Okay, so now you're pregnant, you're struggling with your own mental health. Did you struggle with any postpartum depression?
I did, yeah. And I want to speak to something first before I get to postpartum. When I was pregnant, I struggled with something called antenatal depression that I did not know existed because not everyone's talking about that. A lot of people talk about postpartum. Not a lot of people are having a conversation about depression during pregnancy. Because a lot of people, when they're pregnant, what we see on the internet and in the world is the very excited moms that are throwing the huge baby showers and they're excited about the gender reveal and so excited about buying clothes and all this stuff. Like, I was incredibly depressed while I was pregnant. And it was extremely hard because I felt like I didn't get to enjoy pregnancy like I feel like I should have. But it was like this switch that flipped for me because I was in a really, really good place in life right before I got pregnant. I just got off my antidepressants. I was eating really healthy. I was finally getting like some sort of fitness routine in and I was doing really, really well. And then life was like, bam, pregnancy. And then I started getting into depression again. So postpartum depression was kind of expected for me just because of what I dealt with when I was pregnant throughout the entire time. But yeah, I think a lot of it had to do with that too. Another thing, right towards the end of my pregnancy, I got Bell's palsy. And that also hit me out of nowhere. It was literally, there was, everything was fine until one night. I was like, I just felt like my nose on one side, like I couldn't flare my nose. And I was like, well, this is kind of weird. And like my face feels kind of weird. And I told my husband, I was like, something is off. And he's like, oh, I'm sure it's fine. Well, then the next day I woke up and I literally could not move the entire right side of my face. And when I went into the doctor, this, keep in mind, this was literally a month before I gave birth to my daughter. When I went into the doctor, they were like, well, we don't really have a cure for Bell's palsy. We can give you valaciclovir and steroids. And it might work, might not. But they're like, most people, they have their Bell's palsy clear up in 2 weeks and then you're back to normal. Well, I was not. It actually took me probably 6 months or more to gain function back in my face. I chose not to get medication because I was very, very cognizant of not putting any medication in my body, even painkillers when I was pregnant. I just didn't want to do it. And I wasn't going to do it in the last month right before my baby was born. And so a huge contributing factor to my postpartum depression was the fact that I had this huge change in my face. I felt ugly. I felt like I didn't want to show up in pictures. I didn't want to show up in public. Like I just, in every way possible, did not feel like myself between the major body change, my facial change, and then also now being a new mother. The lack of sleep as a new mom is really, really hard. I mean, having to be up every 2 to 3 hours to nurse, it's hard. Breastfeeding in the beginning, it hurts. It's hard. There were just like all these things hitting me at once, and I felt like I couldn't take all the cute pictures and stuff because, again, like I literally had no use of the right side of my face. And it's still not 100%. I still struggle with that some days because, you know, I look back at what I used to be and what my face used to look like, and I'm like, man, I miss that. But I think I wasn't really taught in life early on that just because we're this way today doesn't mean we're guaranteed to be this way forever. Like, nothing in life is guaranteed. And I've heard that phrase before, nothing in life is guaranteed, but I never really equated it with like me as a person. Like, just because I have limbs today doesn't mean that I'm guaranteed to have limbs for the rest of my life. But when we lose a part of our bodily function, it's like a little bit of an identity crisis. And so I would say that all in all, like postpartum, that is probably one of the things that I struggled the most with because it was really, really hard for me.
And we talked about that when I was on your amazing podcast about the loss of my vision.
Yeah.
And how that totally changed my life. But now, you know, I can remember, and we talked about this on your amazing show. Your story doesn't end here. I love your show, by the way. I love it, love
Thank
it, love
you.
it, love it. But like we talked about is I knew that there was Labor Day 2012. That was the moment that I decided that I'd rather be a father and a husband than a statistic. What was the moment? Because I know everybody can remember the moment where they say, you know what? I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm going to get up, even though I don't want to get up. I'm going to go take a shower. I'm going to go brush my teeth. And I'm going to become the badass that I once was. So talk about your literal come to Jesus moment when you said, all right, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And my story doesn't end here.
Yeah. So my most profound moment was in 2020. And I know it sounds like I'm backtracking a little bit because I just talked about all these things that are more recent, but I did realize that life's a journey, right? Like, we're not always, just because we have a moment at one point doesn't mean that everything's going to be uphill from there. We're going to have our ups and downs. And in that moment is what set me up to be able to handle all these other moments. So yes, it might sound like I didn't always necessarily handle moments correctly, but had I gone through the postpartum and the antenatal depression before 2020, I don't know if I would have made it through that. But I had the baseline foundation of my personal development that helped me get through that really rough time period of my life that, like I said, we're still kind of working through bits and pieces of that. But it was in 2020. And what's funny is it it wasn't initially that I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna hit the ground running, personal development, all this stuff. My initial pain point for me was that when I was on debt, constantly in the gym working out, I felt like I wasn't getting the physical results that I needed. And so for me, it all started with my nutrition. And I decided that I wanted to just start taking better care of my body from a nutrition standpoint. And so I connected with a friend who was using these nutritional meal replacement shakes and supplements, and in that I got connected to an incredible community of people who were living life differently. And I had said earlier that right before I got pregnant, I was in probably the best place in my life. It was all those months leading up to that. It was me finally tapping into podcasts and reading books and understanding that the 5 people we spend the most time around, those are the people we're going to be the most like. And it doesn't mean that we have to go spend thousands of dollars to go meet like a Jim Rohn or go meet a Tony Robbins. You can watch YouTube videos, and that can count as you spending time with someone. Because if we think about the garbage that most people listen to every single day, like the music alone that a lot of people listen to is low vibrational, and it's done that way on purpose. A lot of TV shows these days, they're low vibrational, done that way on purpose, or they're just junk TV. And I'm not saying that it's bad to listen to music or watch TV shows. What I'm saying is it's important to be aware of what we are putting into our mind and our bodies. And
And
so for
and I totally agree, because as I'm driving to pick up lunch this morning, automatically I don't even put on the radio anymore. I'm listening to Audible, and
yeah,
I'm listening to the new book by Patrick Bet David. So for me, it's kind of, I don't even turn on the radio. I don't turn on the news. For me, it's all personal development. It's all learning. So for me, Audible. If people say, "Well, I can't afford to be in front of a Patrick Bet David," but for $15 a month, you can get millions of downloads of, every month I get a specific new book or something. So
yeah,
last month it was Alex Hormozy. This month it's Patrick Bet David. But even during the rest of the month, there's millions of titles you can download for $15 a month.
right.
So, if you go to McDonald's, you can't even get a breakfast for $15.
And
Invest in
then say,
yourself before you invest in things,
yes.
right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And even then YouTube. I listened to so many episodes of Impact Theory on YouTube where
John
uh
Bellew, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
where there's so much value. I started listening to Diary of a CEO recently, where there's so much value. This podcast, the Vertical Momentum Resiliency podcast, the amount of value that I've gotten from guests that you've had on here talking about personal development type things, or things to help grow you. We live in this information age where this information is free or it's very low cost, or you can invest and spend a little more to get a little more access to that information, or have more of that personalized one-on-one. But yeah, for me it was 2020, and I don't know the exact date, but I know it was at the end of that year that I was like, okay, you know what, like this, enough is enough. I'm going to do something different with my life. And then it created a domino effect from there that really laid the foundation for, I would say, everything in my life today. Because a lot of it had to do with seeing what was possible, seeing that, oh, it's not just the 60-year-olds and 70-year-olds that are successful. There are people that are in their 20s that are successful. They just learn the mindset piece and the personal development piece, and I can do that too. And watching them continue to succeed and build their lives and learn their lessons, and be fully transparent about that journey and process. And so,
Now,
yeah,
like I was in the fitness industry for over 30 years with GNC. Trained many IFBB pros, Mr. Olympias, and stuff like that. And something I would tell them, I can read as many muscle and fitness, I can read the muscular development, I can read that. But until I get under the squat rack and start putting in the reps, that's when I'm going to see the development. So you can read all the personal development books a person wants, but until they enact what they're being taught, then it doesn't do any good. Like I interviewed a guy, and all he does is he fills seats for Gary Vee. He fills seats for Tony Robbins, Ed Milet. And I asked him, well, how do you guys do it? He's like, well, we know that if we go to a certain town, 97% of the people that were there last year are going to come see Tony again.
Mm-hmm.
And only 3% of the people that are going are actually going to use what he says.
Yeah.
So that's why you see the same people go to the same thing month after month, year after year, and never change. Just like you can see somebody go to the gym year after year and their body looks exactly the same. Yeah. Because they decide to do something different.
Right.
So what did you do different when you're like saying, okay, I see where I need to be. So you had to start taking different steps, correct? So what were the steps you started taking besides listening to personal development?
Yeah, so a huge help for me back then when I was first starting was accountability. As someone who has honestly struggled with taking action throughout my life, having a daily call every single weekday where we would get together for 15 minutes, sometimes less than that, and just someone would talk about something of value. We would just connect. Having someone to call me out on my shit if I wasn't doing things the right way. That is huge for someone who struggles with taking action. And I think that's where a lot of my stagnation lied when I was going through my period of depression. I actually found myself avoiding the people who I knew would call me out on my shit because I was like, I don't want to hear it. And it can be a really tough place to be, but also being stagnant is a very tough place to be. Knowing that a year of life is wasted because instead of just facing the hard conversations and calling myself out on the things that I'm not doing, I decided to make excuses. And so it's actually been pretty recent again that I decided that I wanted to start focusing solely on taking action. Probably within the last 3 months that I decided, okay, I'm going to do this again. And then this year, instead of having my brain all over the place, I'm going to focus on the key things that are going to move the needle forward. Dean Graziosi, he talks about this a lot, just moving the needle forward, which might, like I said, in my resiliency definition earlier, it doesn't always have to be that huge thing. Sometimes it's a small thing, but we just have to focus on moving the needle forward. And so I'm in a very different place in my life now than I was in 2020. In 2020, I was just in the Navy and I was, in a small network marketing business focusing on just those few things. And I wasn't a mom. Well, now I have multiple businesses in the family. I'm a mom. I have community initiatives that I'm working on. And so to be able to say, okay, let's hone in on a few things. And I'm actually doing a challenge right now. A life mastery, a 5-day life mastery challenge where on day one, what we do is we say, hey, here's the 10 things I want to accomplish by the end of this year. And let's break it down into quarters and just focus on the small action items. And so I'm really excited to be able to hone in on those things this year and really see where it catapults me to the next level.
Well, one thing I want to give a big shout out to Dean Graziosi. He actually shouted out my podcast, which I'm so grateful for. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because 2 years ago, my dad was about to pass, and I had to go to Myrtle Beach. I brought Dean, and he talks about finding out your why and asking the 7 whys.
Yes.
Until eventually you're down to like, okay, this is my purpose in life. And this is why I want to do what I want to do. And I think until you figure out your why, your how is never coming
Yes.
until you figure out your why. So I want to give a big shout out to Dean. So talk to us about what you got going now. Tell us about your 5-day challenge. Tell us about your amazing podcast and what else is going on in your life and your business right now.
Yeah, so the 5-day challenge, it's not my challenge specifically. It's actually one of my good friends, Morgan T. Nelson. He lives in Australia. He has the Dream Out Loud podcast, and he's also very heavily in the personal development world. I did business with him back in 2020, and he's one of the most influential people on the beginning parts of my journey and continues to be influential. So definitely check out what he's doing if you haven't. He's an incredible person, and he runs challenges and events like this all the time. But he's doing his 5-day life mastery challenge that I'm doing right now, just to kick off the year on a good foot. What I am working on, I still have my podcast, Your Story Doesn't End Here. We just started into the world of video podcasting, and so that's been really exciting. I'm really loving it so far. I got this fancy new webcam for Christmas, and so really putting it to good use. But Your Story Doesn't End Here. It's on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, also now on YouTube. And so please, the goal by the end of Q1 is to be at 1,000 subscribers. So underscore YSDEH is the YouTube channel. Please go subscribe because it would absolutely mean the world to me. What else are we working on? So locally in my community, I am now working more with transition of service members. And so there is this whole timeline of transition specific tools and resources. One of them that I want to mention is managing your transition timeline. If you are transitioning out of the military and you are 2 years from your EAOS, go to mytt365.online and sign up for managing your transition timeline. It's going to give you an electronic checklist that actually appears as an app where you can see step by step what you need to do in your transition, and it lays it out for you over 2 years so it is not overwhelming at the very end. Does not replace TAPS, but it is in addition to it. Another great program is called Onward Ops. That is in collaboration with the ETS sponsorship program through the VA. It helps assign a sponsor in a community that you are moving to after you separate so that you have some guidance and some help, kind of similar to sponsorship in the military when you get in. I haven't tried it myself, but hopefully it's more put together than the military sponsorship programs because those aren't always great. But Onward Ops is a great program too, so check that out. And then Reboot, which is Reverse Boot Camp, is also another fantastic program to help rewire the mindset from military to civilian mindset. And Richard, I can give you all the info for that if you want to have that to share with people or to put in show notes or anything. But yeah, those are the main things that I'm working on right now. I also have a mental health and self-care blog. It is called Soul Serenity. SoulSerenityHub.com is the website for that if anyone wants to go check it out. And then lastly, working on launching some leadership mentorship programs that I'll only take a few clients on for, but the goal of that is to actively be the change in that culture of a positive mental health culture in the military. I talked a lot about how leadership had a lot to do with why I decided to get out and why I had a rough time in the military. And so the goal of the leadership mentorship is to one-on-one and then also soon group programs to allow that space and the opportunity for people to learn how to be better leaders to create a better culture in the military. So stay tuned for more info on that. I haven't fully launched it yet, but that is the next project that I'm working on.
And I love it, but I just wanted to I wasn't supposed to tell anybody, but because you're here, I'm actually going to drop something. I'm working with a client and his podcast goes live Valentines Day. I'm personally coaching him, and it's called Open Ranks Move. It teaches you how to make sure you get all your paperwork right, step by step by step, so you can get your disability as you're leaving. And this way you're set up financially from the day you step off base.
Wow.
So guys, my friend Jerome Spearman, he's actually it's called Open Ranks Move. It will be live on Valentine's Day because we all have a heart of service and a heart of veterans. So, guys, if you're a veteran and you're struggling to find mental health and how to get disability ratings, he's going to teach you from nuts to bolts. So I wanted to put that out there, but shh, don't tell anybody. But okay, so this is a teaching podcast. So the last question I'm going to ask you is, if there's somebody out there struggling with their mental health right now, what would be your top 3 pieces of advice that they can start implementing today to start finding some peace in their life?
Yeah, so everyone's going to be a little different. I want to start with that. And so know that, these are 3 things that you can try. If you try it and it does not work for you, that is okay. But from an individualized standpoint, I would first say that you should do something to take care of you. And that you can personalize very much. You can go on a walk if you like going on walks. You can go have a self-care day if that's what you like to do. Call someone if that's what you like. Do something to take care of you, and do not overthink it. It can be anything. It can be taking a nap, but guilt-free, do something to take care of you would be my first piece of advice. My second piece of advice would be to find your support system, find your tribe. And I get it. Not all of us are super, super connected with, social things and whatever, but your tribe does not have to be the group of girls or guys that goes out and drinks at the bar. Your tribe could be Twitch if you're a gamer. It could be on the internet. It could be in a Facebook group. It could be a community of people within your actual physical community. But find your tribe of people, because you're going to need a support system. We're humans. We need people. We are not designed to be alone. And then lastly, for mental health, I would say if you need to, please reach out for professional help. But I also want to caveat that by saying that professional help is not always your baseline talk therapy therapist. I want to say that there are hundreds of different modalities when it comes to mental health, that there's horse therapy, there are water therapies, there is music therapy, there's neuro-linguistic programming that people are now very much intertwining into therapy. And so do your research on modalities and find something that you think might be a good fit for you and try that. If it does not work after trying it, then try something else. You might not even need therapy. You might just need a coach to guide you. And that also, in my opinion, is very much professional help, because it's just a different kind of professional help. We're all experts at what we know and what we have had lived experience through. So don't discount the different types of help out there, and don't feel like there's only one option of talk therapy, because there's so much more out there.
I love it. So guys, make sure you check her out. Amazing. Check out her podcast. Your story doesn't end here. There was an amazing episode with this young, handsome guy that from a while ago, but make sure you check out the podcast. And guys, like the t-shirt I'm wearing says, "Today I decide." Guys, I'm a big Joel Osteen guy. And something he reiterates all the time is that every day we wake up, we have a choice to be a victim or to be a victor. And if you're listening to this podcast, you have decided to no longer be a victim. You are the victor. So I love you guys so much. Guys, make sure you check out verticalmomentumpodcast.com. That's where we have all of our t-shirts, our swag, our coffee. And this episode will be on verticalmomentumpodcast.com. So check it out. And I just want to say, Rachel, I'm so blessed and grateful that you're in my circle. And I appreciate you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you. And thank you so much for having me on again.
It's awesome. And I love it. So guys, remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is but up. And my next episode, in less than 45 minutes, we're going to teach you how to build a business after you get out of service. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, this is going to be the podcast to listen to. All right, guys, have an amazing week, and I'll see you in about 45 minutes. Love you guys. Have a great week, Rachel. Be good.
Bye. Thank you.